The story by the founders were that Elijah Bond and Charles Kenner were playing it with members of their family. They asked it what it wanted to be called, and it spelled out O-U-I-J-A. And today that's kind of why they use it. William Fuld would later say that it was the combination of the words we and Yah put together. But William Fuld was a master marketer, so he would change the stories when they kind of got old and stale. So when he thought there was a better story, he would tell it. So how does the Ouija board work? And I think that's a big question. How many people here believe when you use a Ouija board, you're contacting the other side? It's their spirits that you can contact. And how many people think it's your subconscious? And how many people think it's just your friend bullshitting? I think I've seen all three of those things, actually. I think, like everything, nothing works the same for everybody. And those are basically a couple of trains of thoughts on this. It's ideomotor response or automatism, that your hand wants to move, you want this to work, and when you ask it a question, it starts to answer. And it's basically a trick that your brain is playing on you. That's what psychologists will tell you. Now you'll have spiritualists or people who believe in the paranormal, that it's a demon, it's spirit, it's something other than yourself. And then you have psychics now who are basically saying that it's actually a form of telepathy, that when you sit down and play it, the Ouija board is opening up this portal that is a connection between the two people. So they're asking you a question about him, and you don't know this answer, but somehow you're getting that from him. So those are basically three trains of thought. Basically, when is the Ouija board popular? Because it's 121 years old. There are a lot of things out there that people use to entertain themselves or talk to spirits that have not lasted. But this has. So this is special. Something's different about this. Basically, it's cyclical. So times of war and times of economic depression, the Ouija board gets really big. So super popular right now, right? You see a lot of movies, Paranormal Activity, all three, I think. I haven't seen the third one. Has anyone seen the third one here? Well, I guess it didn't do very well. But it's used quite a bit. Now, if we draw a line in the sand as to when spiritualism started in the United States, we would basically say that starts with the Fox sisters. They basically started modern spiritualism, and that's in 1848. And basically, it's a story of three girls that claim to contact a spirit by rapping. And they would hear they'd ask questions, and they would get knocks back, and that would work on the alphabet. And that started this huge craze. Now, later on, they would recant and say that it was a hoax, but the genie was out of the bottle. And so once that happened, all kinds of things started. Here's an interesting quote that I like to say. This was a book from the 1850s called Table Turning and Table Talking. We like to think of people in the Victorian times as being ignorant and stupid. The truth is, they were just as modern-ish in their times as we are today. There were people who immediately called the spiritual movement just a crock. This is just what people wanted to believe. It's not really true, and they just didn't accept it. But you don't have the internet, you don't have your iPhones, there's like a lot of time to kill. So all these things are fun. They're social. And today, if you walked into your friend's house and the whole family was playing the Ouija board, what the hell is happening here? Back then, it was just common. You'd probably just jump in and start playing. So this book called Table Turning and Table Knocking, the author said this about this, which I thought was really interesting. We suspect that if the cause of the revolution of the tables were to be closely investigated, it would be found to result in that form of species of electricity of which, though glass is a non-conductor, the glass and the bottle are principal agents. So what does that mean? It means that he's saying that when you do this works a lot better. and this was, again, common right from the beginning. So it wasn't that everyone just believed that this worked. It was just like today. There was a bunch of people who believed it worked and a bunch of people who didn't. But a lot of people played it. And again, the reason the Ouija board became so popular was it was the first mass-produced game of its type. So before, people were making these type of devices by themselves and at home. The Ouija board was the one that first marketed. Now, what did it come from? How did it come about? So there are two things that were happening. In the 1800s, over in Europe, they were using a device called the planchette. And that's the piece today that's movable on the Ouija board. And it looked a lot bigger, and it would have 2 rollers at the bottom on the big side and a hole at the top. And you would put a pencil in it, and you'd put your hand on it, and you'd ask a question, and it would write out the answer. So people believed it was spirit writing. The other thing that was happening in Europe and a little bit in the United States were things called dial plate boards. And dial plate boards were round plates, and there would be the needle, and it would be stuck on one place, and it would point out, like in an arc, the letters. So you have the beginnings of the Ouija board, and those 2 things merged, and it's kind of interesting that what we know today. So, 1886, we have an article in the New York Tribune that talks about this new planchette, the new talking board sweeping Ohio. At the same time, you have 2 men that would later claim, same year, 1886, in Chestertown, that they invented the Ouija board. Now the truth is, it's hard to invent something without the internet and have it spike all the way across the country if it's just happening here in Baltimore. So the belief is this was coming up on its own. Someone had kind of figured out you put these dial plate boards with a planchette. The whole town was kind of going crazy over, ooh, this is new and neat. And Charles Kennard and E.C. Reich read this article, which also got reprinted in 1886 in the Baltimore Sun. So we think they read it. It had pictures of what the talking board looked like. It's exactly like the Ouija board. And they started tinkering with it and playing with it. Now what would happen is Elijah Bond would meet up with Charles Kennard. Charles Kennard would leave Chestertown, was trying to shop around this game, brought it to Elijah Bond, and he was an attorney. And he thought, you know, this is just the bee's knees. This is the coolest thing ever. I think we could make this a little neater and a little nicer, and we could patent it. So he files for a patent. And it's kind of strange because today, as you'll see, you can make different talking boards, but between 1890 and 1908, the Ouija board was the only board that could be made because of this patent. So he patents it, goes into business with Charles Kennard, actually starts his business on 17 St. Paul Street, which isn't here anymore. It was the old Barnum building, for anyone who's a historian in Baltimore. And a couple of months later, they would go into business with a few other people who would put together the first company called the Kennard Novelty Company. So that was Charles Kennard, Colonel Washington Bowie, the same Bowie as the family from the Bowie knives, Harry Wells Rusk. Interesting thing about him, he was the president of this company, and he was also a politician. So I mean, today, can you imagine in our political atmosphere that someone who was in politics could actually be making Ouija boards and be a state senator? He was a Maryland senator. He was in the Maryland House of Delegates, and he actually also served in the U.S. House of Representatives. So today, you know, if you don't say the right thing, you get kicked out. But you could make Ouija boards in 1890, and it was fine. So again, the board that's being passed around right now, the big wooden board, that's the first board that was made. And it's really interesting because it's large, and it was made to be played by a lot of people. The planchette on it, for the people who've seen it, looked a bit like a paddle. And the reason that was because the planchette itself had already come out. In order to make this new, in order to make it exciting, he changed the design. So they made this 4-legged thing. Now, as you know, today, it went right back to the original design because that's what people really wanted. And then also, if you notice on the back of that, there are like slats. And one, they were used to hold the board together, but also in the original designs, it looks like it was to make it more like a table. Now, William Fold was one of the original investors in the company, and also in 1892 came out with his first improvement patent on the talking board. He's someone we consider the father of the Ouija board. And like, why do I say that? Well, because he and his family would make Ouija boards here in Baltimore from 1890 all the way to 1966 when they sold it to Parker Brothers. So how many people in the audience knew that the Ouija board was born in Baltimore? Nice. And where do you hear that? Yeah. Anybody? Yeah. Like where do you hear that it was?
I knew because I looked up some historical stuff, and I have a couple of the old Baltimore make Ouija boards, and I actually have a whole planchette that actually it's wooden and it has the actually has the stuff on there like that. I brought it with me today and everything.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But it's like I knew about that. I knew about him falling to his death off the Harvard Avenue factory or something like that.
Yes, yes, he did. We'll get there.
Okay.
Don't skip ahead. That's fantastic. How about someone back there who?
He actually has a gravestone in Greenmount Cemetery.
He does. Actually, that's Elijah Bond. William Fold, actually, but he does have a gravestone as well. And how do you know?
I wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was a foreman in the original company, and he soon took it over. Now, what happens when something's really successful? We see this all the time. So the minute something comes out that's really big, people want to copy it. Well, this company from Massachusetts, I live in Boston, so I checked this out immediately when I discovered it, called the W.S. Reed Toy Company, made another board, and they called it like a planchette, called the Esperito board. Now, this was an interesting story because we had found a Ouija board with the word Esperito and another design on the back. It turns out that what happened was this company tried to copy and make it. Well, the Kenner Novelty Company, which would become the Ouija Novelty Company, did not like people infringing upon their patent. Like any patent, you have to defend it or you can lose it. So what they did was they not only shut them down, but they took that trademark in the deal and put it on the back of their board to let everyone know, we are the only ones who can make this.
Your mic is cut out.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You're cutting out.
Okay. Maybe that'll work better. Sorry about that. Charles Kenner, which is one of the founders, he basically decided, I don't like all these other partners. It's kind of like cramping my style. So he decided he would go to Chicago and become the foreman and the manager of that branch. Well, that lasted about a year before he decided, you know what, I don't really want to work with anyone else. I'm going to start my own company. So what he did was he talked to that branch factory, and he said, you don't want to work for them. You want to work for me. We should start our own company. So he took that address, and he took all the company, and he named it the Northwestern Toy Company, and decided really quickly, hey, we should make a talking board. This is clearly selling well. So he made a Volo board. Well, you can't make the Volo board because there's patent. Same thing happened. They immediately went on and tried to stop it, and they did. The board that I told you was a Ouija board that had the Esperito on the front of it. The design was of the Volo board. So the company then shut down one of the former founders and basically made them send all of the supplies to them, which according to a newspaper article was burned. So it was a serious deal. I mean, lots of money was being made, and it didn't matter whether you were one of the original owners or one of the owners of the patents. You weren't going to make it. Well, you would think if you ended up getting pulled into federal court and all of your company was shut down and you basically lost all of your money, you would stop. Well, in 1897, Charles Kenner came up, and we have that here. We have the Isley board. So he tried it again. Basically the same thing happened to him again. And he would try again in 1919. Now, the interesting thing happened. In 1897, William Fold brought his brother Isaac Fold into the business, and they basically started working together. In 1898, the Ouija Novelty Company overall licensed them exclusively the right to make Ouija boards, which they made together as brothers from 1898 to 1901. In 1901, they had a falling out, and no one knows why, what they fought over, but that falling out would last until from 1901 to 1997, which was a big feud. And the feud, to give you a perspective on the feud, Isaac Fold, they had plots in a cemetery, the Fold family, and his daughter was buried there. In about 1902, the cemetery moved a lot of graves to put an access road in, and some of the Folds that were there were moved. The feud was so bad within those first couple of years that Isaac Fold actually moved his daughter out of the cemetery. He did not want his daughter buried in the same cemetery. So it's a serious feud. Anyone who's ever had a family feud, they're probably all the same, but this was pretty serious. Isaac didn't like being told he couldn't make Ouija boards. And I made them since 1897. I'm going to continue making them. He makes these boards and has immediately got a court order to shut down after a couple months. He then goes on to make Oriole boards. Again, Baltimore Orioles, perfect, right? Unfortunately, that landed him in court for 20 years. So 1901 court case lasts all the way until 1919, isn't decided until 1920, that he can no longer make anything, that he copied these boards. And up here you'll see an Oriole board that's out here. It's an exact copy of that. So whatever happened caused him to try to keep making them, even though he shouldn't. It's interesting. In 1997, I was actually contacted by the granddaughter of William Fold and the grandson of Isaac Fold. They're about 2 weeks apart, and for my website. So Kathy Fold sent me an email, and then Stuart Fold sent me an email. And I was thinking, do I tell each other that I'm talking to the other one? Because the first question I asked was, I read about this feud, is this still going on? And both of them were like, oh yeah, it's still going on. I've never met or talked to anyone from the other side of the family. And so I'm like, oh crap. And I had become pretty good friends with Kathy and talked to her and finally said to her, look, I was contacted by the other side of the family. You're asking me all of these questions. I'm basically getting the answers because I'm asking him and then coming back and telling you. And, you never knew your grandfather. He didn't know his grandfather. No one knows what happened. I'll give you his number and, maybe you'll call him. And I thought, there's no way. She's never going to call him. Well, sure enough, she picked up the phone and called him. And basically, I guess she called. Stuart's wife answered the phone. And she said, is this the Stuart Fold's house who's related to Isaac Fold? Yeah. She said, well, I'm Kathy Fold, the granddaughter of William Fold. And she said, oh my God, stay right there. So she starts yelling. Anyone who knows Kay, you guys know Kay, she's yelling at Stuart, you gotta get over here, gotta get over here. And so she tells him to Stuart gets on the phone. He basically told Kathy he'd waited his whole life to meet someone from the other side of the family. Because to him, it was a fight that didn't involve either one of them, and Kathy the same thing. So 1997, we actually got to do a really neat thing. The two sides of the family got together, and they had a Fold family reunion. So after 96 years, that feud was put to bed. So it was kind of a neat thing. And that's how I got to meet some people up in the front. It's pretty cool. Going through all the things that you can't see, so we'll...
You can act it out.
I can act it out. So one of the things someone brought up was the Harford Avenue factory that William Fold fell off of and died. So basically, 1919, William Fold tells the press, the Ouija board told me to prepare for big business. And what he did by that was, he took a block in downtown Baltimore. It was Harford Lamont Federal. There's no Lamont Street anymore. And he basically built a 3-story factory where he made lots of other toys. In fact, most people don't know that William Fold was better known early on for creating and trademarking the return pool table. So until his time, there were the little pockets. And he kind of came up with the slat system, which we kind of all take for granted for. Now you'd think he'd be well known for that. Well, no, not when you make the Ouija board, because that's going to surpass that. So he makes this huge 3-story building. The Baltimore Sun calls it a skyscraper. And in 1927, he basically climbs up where he's going to replace a flagpole. He was a micromanager. That's how all good business people are. And he leans back, and those moorings, those iron bars that are across that he's holding on to, rips out of the thing, and he falls back. Now, it's kind of an interesting chain of events that happens. He falls back, and in those days, factory windows would go like this, right? They bend out, or for you guys can say they go like this. And he fell back, grabbed onto it, and it slammed shut, and that force then threw him back harder than if he had just fallen. Every other day, on the day he fell, there would have been a truck right where he fell that would have been delivering Ouija boards. That day, the shipment was late. So he falls down, he breaks his legs, he breaks his arms, he has a concussion. He's hurt, but he would have been fine. An employee sees this, is horrified, grabs him, picks him up, throws him in the back of his car, and drives him to the hospital. Look, what do you know today? We don't move people, especially if they fall off the roof. And if you can imagine the ride to the hospital in a 1927 car without any shocks was pretty painful. What happened to him was one of his ribs pierced his heart, and he died later in
in the hospital. So that's what happened to him. A lot of people always ask that question. You know, it's fascinating. The Ouija board told him to build this building, and then you know, he had an accident off it. So what happened was his children, who had basically taken a big part of the business, because William Folt had entered politics as well. So when he died, he was actually a member of the House of Delegates, and he followed this path that the other members of the original company had taken, which is, you know, the more you do, kind of the higher you get. And he basically, in 1920, did an article with the Baltimore Sun saying that the company took in $3 million in 1920, and he made a profit of $1 million after building the factory. If you think of what that equaled today, it's just unbelievable. That's a lot of Ouija boards. Now, in the 1920s, huge Ouija boom, which is, again, why he built this factory. And people would say, well, did William Folt believe in the Ouija board? Was he a spiritualist? Every article that was ever written about him that he gave a speech, he would say, I'm no spiritualist, I'm a Presbyterian. But he was very smart, because even though he was a Presbyterian, he also knew that he liked business. And telling people stories like the Ouija board told me to, and he'd later then say, no, I never really played with it. Or, yeah, one time we lost a shipment, and the Ouija board told us where it fell off the train in Ohio, and we found it. We just knew. So he was just a brilliant person who knew how to sell this. Because honestly, without William Folt, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this today. It's a fascinating device, but he kept reinventing it for every generation. And then his children would do the same thing. So the 1920s, the Ouija board was so big that there were two #1 selling sheet music. One was Ouija, Ouija, Tell Me Do, and there was Ouija Mine. If I could play the piano, I'd play it for you. But you wouldn't want to hear it. So how many people, I mean, you all hear that the Ouija board is kind of this bad, evil, awful thing, and we have proof actually how rotten and evil and dark it is. In 1920, May 1st of 1920, Norman Rockwell, well-known Satanist, painted the Ouija board cover for the Saturday Evening Post. I'm kidding you guys. like the cover of the Saturday Evening Post by Norman Rockwell was a photo of a man and a woman playing the Ouija board. And as you all know, it's just Americana. It's just regular. It was what was happening everywhere. And why was the Ouija board so popular with people who were younger? Well, you think back, this goes right back to the 1890s. When you went on a date, you didn't ask the person. You had to ask their father. You could never be alone with them. You certainly could never touch them. Well, the Ouija board broke every one of these rules. You put it on your lap, knees to knees. Your hands were touching. So, I mean, women may be playing this because they're trying to talk to the other world, and men are playing it, well, because they want something. So, and if you look at that Norman Rockwell cover, he's actually looking, she's looking up, thinking, wow, this is so great. He's looking right around her chest area. And that hasn't changed today. It's the same thing. And movies. The first movie we know of was in 1919, and there were early cases of Ouija madness. So just like things that are good and popular, and we also had some things that were very interesting. There was a case in El Cerrito, California, basically, that where the Ouija board kind of took off. And I'm just kidding. It's a good one. And basically, a girl, Jenny, was killed by a car, and the family then became so sad and upset they started using Ouija boards to find out who did it. And then the neighbors were coming in. And then the whole town was, and it was 24 hours a day, that entire town were trying to make contact to find out what happened to poor Jenny. And this was kind of making people a little crazy. And they found out the license plate number, they checked it out, no license plate was ever given. Well, eventually a bunch of the family ended up in the insane asylum and were kind of shut down. The town tried to pass ordinances banning Ouija boards, it never happened. But there are those things that went poorly. 1921, William Folt did another great thing. So Ouija, the brand, is making money. He decides, what else could we put this on? Ouija oil. So it was for rheumatoid arthritis, it was for your aches and pains, it was snake oil. But it's sold. And we actually know today that Kathy Folt had told me that it also makes great furniture polish for like your paneling, because they had some left over and it worked out well for them. The other thing he did was he put it on jewelry, because people believed in the power of the name. And that's pretty important with the Ouija board, because your belief that Ouija does something or means something says a lot about it. So he put it on jewelry, tie tacks, watches, and that sold pretty well too. So that building we talked about was an interesting thing, because as I had started my research in 1997, I came down and we got to take a tour of that old factory. When I talked to the owner, he threw out kind of a challenge to me, and anyone who knows, never give me a challenge, because I don't take no for an answer. And he basically told me, hey, you should see if you can get this building made a historic landmark. And he's like, I'm the owner, and that would make this building worth something, so that'd be good. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. I think we should try that. Well, it took 3 years. But basically in 2009, the mayor had a ceremony, and the building was made a historic landmark. So if you go down Hartford, you will see that. It has a little sign on it. And that was pretty cool. William Andrew Fold. So the oldest son of William Fold had been running basically the company for a long time. So when his father passed away, he took over. And it's really interesting because he started working when he was 16, and he had more patents and trademarks than his father. So he had 7 of them when he died. Catherine Frederick, William Fold's daughter, she also was vice president of the business in the beginning, and she had a couple of patents for in different toys as well. Hubert Fold, who's Kathy's father, he was named the president. He was the youngest son, and as he grew up, he took over too. An interesting board that's out here is the Electric Mystifying Oracle, and I'm not sure where it is. I guess it's over here, but it's something that's very unique. So 1933 to 1935, they made a board that basically, as you put your hands on it, you'd have this planchette that had a battery in it and a light bulb. It would make contact with each one of these little divots that are on here. Thank you, Vanna. You basically, well, you can hold it, and it would make contact right here, and it would light up. So, 1933, they were thinking, how could we make this really neat? The problem was the war was coming. It didn't sell well. It was $3.50 as opposed to $1.50, and most of them were melted down for scrap metal. Now, you can't see this, but there's a funny story. On the front of this Mystifying Oracle pamphlet is Hubert Fold playing the Electric Mystifying Oracle with a woman. That woman isn't his wife. And the story goes, when she saw that pamphlet, that was the secretary. That secretary didn't work there anymore. That was the secretary's last job, was appearing on that pamphlet. But again, it just goes to show they were always thinking about ways to change it, make it more interesting, and have another generation discover it. So we talked about the good things. There are always and will be titles of things that are shocking. So today we live in an age of Fox News and CNN, and it's constant, like, just information, everything. Oh, a car is speeding down. We're watching these things that just are meaningless. But back then, things made the news that were shocking. It was always the big thing. So here's a title of 1933 Arizona newspaper that said, "Kill your daddy," said the Ouija board, so I did. And this story was basically Ernest Turley is murdered by his 15-year-old daughter. And the story goes, this is a major Lifetime movie for anyone who wants to do it. It basically, the mother is having an affair. The father's away in the armed forces. He comes back. She doesn't want a divorce because she'll have to give up her lifestyle, and she'll only have half of what she has if she's lucky. So she decides, well, I don't want to do that, so I guess I'll kill him. But she doesn't want to kill him because she doesn't have the, the guts to do it. So she's like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll get my daughter to do it. So I'll use the Ouija board, and we'll have the Ouija board tell her, she'll push it, that, she should kill it. So she does. She does this, and the daughter believes it because she's playing with her mom, and her mom's telling her that, this is true. So the mother helps her, she loads up the shotgun, and she blows her father away. And that was an actual story. So as much as, again, we talk about the Ouija board being good, I always tell people, Ouija boards don't kill people, people kill people, basically. Interesting fact, the co-founder of AA, Bill Wilson, said later on that he actually received the 12 steps for a Ouija board. A lot of people didn't know that. But again, remember, the more you dance. Another kind of interesting thing, this is the torture of 77-year-old Herbert Hurd and the murder of his wife Nellie. So there's another like shocking, interesting story. So this woman is using the Ouija board every night, and it's telling her that her husband is cheating on him. So it must be real, the Ouija board told her it was. And the Ouija board told her not only was he cheating on her, but that he had buried all this money and kept it away from her. So she totally bites into this because she's using the Ouija board all the time, every night. And she basically starts, she waits until he gets home, she takes the butt of a gun and she cracks it over his head. And then she ties him up in bed, and she kind of whips him and she hits him with a hot poker, tell me where the money is, tell me who you're cheating me with. This goes on, like night after night after night, until finally he decides, I was going to tell her anything. It was the neighbor, and the money is buried out by the oak. So she goes out and tries to dig it up. It's not there. She finds out he didn't cheat him with him. He's scared. He believes she's going to keep doing this because she's threatening him. So he takes that gun that she's hitting him with, and he shoots her. And he basically actually gets off in court out of self-defense. So, again, Ouija boards don't kill people. People kill people in strange ways. Some people don't know that the third episode of I Love Lucy, The Seance, featured a Ouija board. It's a great episode. And in that episode, basically they ask Lucy, do you Ouija? She takes it totally differently, as you can imagine. And so that gets pretty funny. Scary show, Dennis the Menace. There was an episode, The Raffle, used the Ouija board. 13 Ghosts. How many people saw the original 13 Ghosts? Fantastic. How many people think it's the best movie ever? It's horrible. Like it is the most horrible movie ever. It's fantastic for the time. It's mega cheese, and the acting is just completely over the top. It's like watching a soap opera. You know, like the music comes out, they look up. It's fantastic. But William Andrew Fole and his family decide they need in 1960 to find a new way to advertise. So they work with the producers of Columbia Films to use the Ouija board in the film. Because again, what people will see is you can't use the Ouija board or any product without permission. And how people got around that was if the Folds wouldn't give permission or they just didn't want to pay, what they would do is they would use what they call ask the glass. So they would put these cards around with letters and numbers and put a glass backwards, put your finger on it, and move it to the thing. So a lot of people say, well, that was older, that came before. You know, we actually don't have a whole lot of proof that it came before, but it was a great way to get around getting permission. So they worked with the producers of 13 Ghosts, and they used it, and it did great. The movie used some interesting technology so that it looked 3D-ish, and the movie didn't do so well in the theaters, but it sold a lot of Ouija boards, and I'm sure that's all William Fole cared about. So Parker Brothers. So it's an interesting fact. William Fole, on his deathbed, to his son William Andrew Fole, said, never sell the Ouija board. And they didn't, right? So 1927 to 1966. In 1966, the family had gotten older. People weren't as interested in keeping the business. They got an incredible offer from Parker Brothers, another family business, and decided to sell. What is a little interesting, though, that people have pointed out to me, which I didn't see originally, was that Parker Brothers purchased the board on February 24th, 1966, which was the anniversary of William Fole's death. So that was kind of an interesting fact that the family must have known that, I'm thinking, and sold it on that date. And maybe that was a little tip of the hat to him. In 1967, the Ouija board did something no other game did ever in history. It sold more than Monopoly. So when Parker Brothers took it, it was everywhere. In fact, there were articles in colleges saying that the Ouija board was selling better than the Bible. That was a problem. In fact, actually, in interviewing Kathy told me that one of the interesting things is that early on, his wife was a Catholic. And so they were getting flack for selling the Ouija board. So he went and met with the priest and said basically, what's the problem? And they asked him, do you believe this talks to the dead or talks to spirits? And he was, no, it's just a game, it's just entertainment. It's like, well, then it's fine as long as that's what you believe. And if you make a donation, and so he did regularly. And once the Fold family stopped making it and the donations came out, the Vatican officially came out against the Ouija boards. It was kind of interesting timing. I'm not saying that's what it was, but that's what it was. Now, what changed? So I've shown you all those things of basically how people used it for games and for fun. What changed? What made it something evil? I mean, up until this point, no one was talking about demons getting loose from the Ouija board, or not the mainstream for sure. The Exorcist happened. So 1973, they used the board in the scene. And how many people have seen The Exorcist? I'm sure like lots of people here. How many people remember the scene the Ouija board was in? Right, just a few people. Because the scene was like this big. I think it's like 43 seconds maybe. And it's interesting, it's where Captain Howdy comes from. So Reagan tries to make contact, she's showing her mom, look what I'm playing with, and she can't get it to work. It doesn't work. But what happened was the audience said, oh my God, like using the Ouija board caused this girl's head to spin around, to walk backwards, and spit up split pea soup everywhere. And so what did people do after they like fainted and trampled each other trying to get out of the movie theater? They ran to the stores and they bought Ouija boards because they wanted their friends' heads to spin around, to walk backwards, and to split pea soup. And that's what happened. It's an interesting problem that Parker Brothers and now Hasbro makes the Ouija board has. It's a very fine line. They sell this in toy stores. It's a game. And yet they know what sells it is every time it shows up on TV in some horrific, over-the-top movie. And I will tell you, there are many B movies, they all use Ouija boards. It is the classic way to open the doorway. And it used to be, the other kind of fun thing is, it used to be ghosts, right? The ghosts were scary. Like, no. Now because of reality TV and all the TV shows out there, ghosts are not scary. Now it's demons. Like we've moved up. Ouija boards used to let out ghosts, now they let out demons. So just for anybody knows or sees it on television, that's what basically is happening. Other movies that depicted it really well, Amityville 3D. We all saw that, right? I bet if I asked how many people saw that, there's nobody. But that was a great way that they use Ask the Glass. In 1986, Witchboard came out. Now, originally they wanted to call it Ouija. Parker Brothers said that they would let them. They reneged at the end, so they called it Witchboard. Now, what Kevin Tenney did as the writer and director was fascinating. He took every story, every urban legend, everything that wasn't true, and strung it together and rewrote the entire history. So I've worked for 20 years to undo what he did in that thing, but the movie was fantastic. It really was. But he basically said, I read in some old encyclopedia that Ouija boards were used in the time of Pythagoras, 3000 BC. It's just, there's no proof. It was an American invention as far as we know. That could change tomorrow, but in 20 years of really looking, just not there. So he did a fascinating thing in that movie. If anyone saw it, does anyone remember Tawny Katane?
No.
White Snake? Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, I noticed that gentleman did. Yeah, she did a great video on a car, on the hood of a car. Okay, so the Ouija board, basically, in 1990, Parker Brothers did something that they had a hard time with, actually, according to the records. They made, up until then, it was being made on paper and masonite. And all their games had moved on to paper on cardboard, because it was cheaper. Well, the CEO and the head of marketing and the CFO all met in their office, and the CEO said, look, we can't do this if it's not going to work. We need to make sure that the Ouija board's still going to work on cardboard. So according to the story of the people who were there, they sat down in his office and they played the Ouija board. And it worked. And guess what? It's on cardboard. So that's what they did. Another great movie for people that's really funny if you ever want to watch it, Repossessed, has a great spirit board scene in it. 1998, Parker Brothers did something that was a bit controversial to me and to other people who follow this. They changed the Ouija board completely. They shrunk it down, they made it glow in the dark, and they took off William Fold's name. Now it's interesting because in the original documents, which the Fold family found, one of the agreement was the name always stayed on the board. It would always say, William Fold Talking Board Set. And so like I've told them many times, I bring it up in every conference call I have with Hasbro, that in their next version, they stick William Fold's name back on there. So if you ever feel like sending an email or dropping a letter, you should do that. Another really bad movie that I will tell you about, and I'm not telling you about it so that you watch it. It's horrifying, and I mean like offensive and awful. So I get a lot of contacts to consult. And one of the movies that I got was called Black Devil Doll. And it's black exploitation, 1970s. The plot of the movie is this kind of black radical character is executed in San Quentin. The woman's playing a Ouija board. Through the Ouija board, his soul comes out and makes this little devil doll. And he comes alive and he kills people. It's horrible and it's just really offensive. But there is a fantastically funny Ouija board scene in there. It ranks upon the best. But when I got this script, I read it and I was like, oh, there's no name. I cannot put my name on this. This is horrible. Of course I bought it right away and watched it immediately when it came out. But it does have a great scene in it. But I would tell you, if you're interested in seeing the scene, tell me, I'll email it to you. It's really fun. Don't watch the whole movie. It's very offensive. Remember that if you do. So in 2008 to 2010, Parker Brothers did something else. They had a new CEO, and he decided that the Ouija board is controversial and that could actually sell boards. Why are we not doing anything? There's no advertising. I think, when was the last time anyone saw a advertisement on television for the Ouija board? Never. I think the 70s I remember seeing one. And so they decided they would make limited editions, exclusive. They did it with Toys R Us, and they made certain games pink. So we passed around that pink board. So they made a pink edition. It was one run. It lasted a couple years until it sold out. But it was really funny because I have an article here, and it hit, so February 6, 2010, this hit Fox News. Pink version of the popular Ouija board game has some critics seeing red. And it basically, the article was that it said it was designed for young girls ages 8 and older, but some say the mysterious product is a dangerous spiritual game that opens up anyone, particularly Christians, to attacks on their soul. So now it was not only awful and evil, it was particularly dangerous to Christians. That's kind of interesting since we're a largely Christian country, right? So anyway, it made Fox News. It lasted all of a week, this big hoopla. They had already stopped making it. But it just goes to show, I will say this. I called up all the different Toys R Us and asked them. Completely sold out after that. That article hit and they had tons of extra and it's just gone. Everyone wanted one. And as you saw the board, it looks like My Little Pony exploded all over it. They sent me that when it came out. I was not a big fan, but it sold. So I was wrong. It sold. What can you do? I do a lot of conferences with other paranormal shows that are on. So a lot of them, if you ever watch any of those shows like The Ghost Hunters or Paranormal State or Paranormal Adventure or the Ghost Adventures, all of them, if you watch them, first say they go into a house and they say there's activity and they're like, did anyone play the Ouija board? That's it. That's the answer. It's an easy answer. I go to these things and I talk to people and I'm like, okay, they use something called K2 meters that measure magnetic disturbances that are going on. And they use EVPs, which are electronic voice phenomena. So they use their recorders and they ask questions. And you might think these questions are actually kind of interesting. They ask questions like, who are you? Is there anyone there? Did you die here? Do you have a message for me? And I'm sitting there like, isn't this a Ouija board? This is exactly what you'd ask them. And they're like, well, no, because it just makes this device blink. I'm like, okay, I want everyone to think about this logically. If something out there that doesn't have a body that you can see can make something blink, it can probably just slap you upside the head too, right? I don't have Casper the Friendly Ghost book. He didn't tell me what it can and can't do. But people look at it, well, it's a device. It's not, the Ouija board. You put your hands on. Put your hands on it. And that's how it gets you, that it comes through you. And look, right up into the beginning, the people who used the Ouija board were showing people that it was something moving it, but there are people who believe that you are opening yourself up to having it done. Again, I would tell anyone who's interested in the paranormal, the spiritual, if there's danger in making contact. I don't think the Ouija board is any more dangerous than anything you might use to ask questions and get it back. It's just that the Ouija board's been around for 121 years. And if you've been around for 121 years, you've got all these stories and all of these things. And again, what do people remember? What makes the news? The Ouija board told me to kill my daddy, so I did. Not, the Ouija board told me where my ring was and I found it. Isn't it not a good story? No one cares. Yeah. It was really funny. 2010, Betty White was on SNL. Does like everyone remember or see that? So she did a really interesting skit, and in it, she was talking about Facebook and how Facebook was for losers, and she can't believe anyone spends that much time on it. But one of the things that she talked about was they asked her, well, Facebook is a great way to reconnect with your friends. And she was like, my friends, if I want to reconnect with my friends, I have to pull out the Ouija board. It was fantastic. And again, I love to see that because it just goes to show, if you talk to someone older, they will always tell you something funny about the Ouija board. They'll say, oh my gosh, I remember when we played that with my sister, we pushed it around, scared the hell out of her. And they laugh. You show it to someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they'll be like, we're not having that in the house. That's not Christian. That's not right. We get that, throw that right out of there. It's a funny thing. Today, you see younger people walk right up to them and grab them. You know, was there anyone in here who just did not want to touch the Ouija board as it went around? Like they're going to say it, right? Like they're going to tell me. There are a lot of people who just don't even want to touch it. They really believe that just being near it. I'm filming a Ouija documentary kind of on the history of the Ouija board and what it means today. And we talked to a lot of people and asked them, what do you think? What do you think of the Ouija board? We talked to a lot of people who will tell us it's opening a doorway that you can't close. Other people are like, it's just a game. And I'll never forget, Kathy Fall did an interview with Fox News, and they asked her if the Ouija board was something to be scared of. And her answer was, it depends if you're scared of cardboard and plastic. Probably pretty scary. You know, I have over 500 of these boards in my house. Nothing bad has ever happened. And if it did, I'd sell tickets, and you'd all be there wanting to see what the hell was going on. It just isn't there. And it's not to say that bad things don't happen, but one of the things I did in my research was I called up the top 10 medical facilities and the top 10 psychological facilities in the United States, and I asked them all the same question. How many cases in the past 1, 5, 10, 25, 50, 100 years have had to do with a patient that used a Ouija board or was Ouija injured related? Now, that's exactly what they did. I click. And all that, because again, I never take no for an answer. And I call back, and finally, I got answers from all of them. Do you know how many cases? 0. 0 have been recorded. Now then people will say, critics will say, well, you know, you didn't go to the church. I did try to go to the Vatican. They never released those numbers. But think about it. Even in The Exorcist, if you've got a kid and they start playing around and they're starting to spit up split pea soup and their head's spinning around, where do you go? You go to the doctor first. I mean, we just do. Like, I mean, we don't say, oh, this is totally, it's a demon. We're going straight to the church. Like, I think you go to the doctor. And maybe doctors don't record this information. I would think, I could tell you something, if I was a doctor and someone came in here and told me there was a Ouija injury, I would write that in the notes as well. So again, what's happening is there are 2 lives to the Ouija board. There are what we hear, what we think, and then there's what people believe, these urban legends, which by the way, we call Ouija-stitions, of course, right? It's a great name. Today, many boards are made, pop culture boards, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer never used a Ouija board. There was never a Ouija board in any of the entire seasons. But when they decided they could make money because other people were doing it, they made a Buffy the Vampire Ouija board. Fantastic. Hellboy did it. Emily did it. And recently, Hasbro, for Ozzy Osbourne's last Scream tour, made a special Ozzy Ouija board that everyone got a copy if you spent $666 on a ticket, and you would meet him, and you would have a special Ozzy Ouija board made. So you may see that in the stores eventually as well. And so, you know, I mean, how many people here have one of those stories like that? You know, they used it, they really made them believe that there was something else out there. Like there's a Ouija board. No, that's good. Don't feel bad. I think it's fascinating. That's what we're here for. So.
What scared me is I bought this thing at a flea sale, and I was sick one time, and I didn't have anything to do, so I thought I'll get this board out. Well, first I started asking what my license was, you know, number was, and all these things, and then I started asking some creepy questions, and I said, why are you telling me this? And it goes, I like you. And it scared me. I went and looked for my Bible and slept.
It happens a lot. Your story is actually pretty common. And I think it's funny because...
But how could it do that? I mean, it spelled out some kind of medical thing that I was going to die from, and I couldn't
Oh, you
find
asked
it.
it something you're never supposed to ask. No, I'm just kidding. There's no rules. But doesn't come with a rule book either. One of the Ouija-stitions is never use the Ouija board alone. That you should never burn it, because if you burn it, you'll feel like you're burning. You burned it.
Yes.
Did you get a rash or a sunburn?
I'm a priest and he was supposed to do it.
And what did the priest...
She didn't go to the doctor. She went to the church.
But she didn't spit up split pea soup, too. And so, what did the priest say?
What did it say?
No, what did the priest say to do with it?
He said burn it up.
Yeah. And where did you burn it up?
I got my boyfriend to come over and burn it up in the trash can.
Fantastic.
Outside.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we don't want
But
fires.
it also told him something first.
Oh, wait a minute. So you were scared. Okay. So you were scared. You called your boyfriend over, and then he wanted to be scared too. And what did he ask? What did he ask?
He asked when he was going to die.
So you want to be scared. It's like you're like okay. And
But he died.
We all do.
I was going to say, unfortunately, we all do. But did he die? Did it tell him how he was going to die? And then it didn't know.
Told him when he was going to die.
And did that come true?
Yes.
Did it like, no, well. Did you have something to do with that?
Wait, what's that about people?
I burned him up in a trash can.
Oh,
No, that's a joke.
there's a reporter here. We're so going to read about this tomorrow. Oh my gosh. Does anyone else have a story that they want to share?
Alright, I used the Ouija board at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast.
Fall River, Massachusetts.
This is a long story, really short. So anyway, so they had this old, big full Ouija board. And the lady that's the caretaker there said we could use it, no problem. So it's me and this girl I was dating at the time. I put on the board for a while, and I feel like we're starting to talk to some active spirits. And then, being a jerk, are there any evil spirits out there? And it goes to yes. And and I asked the board, what can you do? Like, what can an evil spirit do? And it spells out Vex, VEX. And at the time, I didn't really know what the term Vex meant. I think the girl I was dating didn't know either, so it's kind of weird that it spelled out something we didn't know. But anyway, it spelled out, are you dead? And then it spelled out, how did Christ feel? It was like a really weird thing to spell out. I had this horrible feeling. So you're like right when you're about to get hit by a car. And then this inevitable feeling.
How many times have you been hit by a car? Just wondering.
But anyway, so that happened, and then the girl she sort of pulled her hand off, and she was really creeped out by it. And I just put my fingers on it, and it starts spelling out eat shit really fast, over and over again, and I don't think I'm that much of a self-loather, but it was doing this, and and then and we stopped at that point, and the lady from Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, she sort of told us you better make sure you send that back. She was actually really upset with us. That might have been a part of her shit, but the other thing that was really interesting was that Ouija board didn't have the felt bottoms on the tips. So it's actually pretty difficult to move the wood across the wood. It actually didn't get some tension. I don't know. I'm not really sure if I believe in it, but it was really crazy.
Well, it's one of the things, what's really interesting, so anyone who's played with the Ouija board knows, it is creepy. I mean, you put your hands on it, waiting for it to answer, it starts to move, and you do think, what the hell is happening here? And for me, personally, whether it's your mind, it's no more astonishing that your mind can play a trick on you. That you're feeling, you're watching, you're right there, you're in it, and it's moving. And so I think it's why, but the truth is, look, we all want to believe there's something else out there. I mean, how many people in this room want to believe that the short time we got here is it? It's over, no more they're gone. I don't think that kind of bodes well for us. And to have something so simple and so easily accessible at every toy store could, prove that there's something else out there. I think it kind of gives us hope. But what's funny about being scared is, if we go to these conventions and people say, no, I don't want to use the Ouija board. I'm like, well, why? They're like, well, you can contact these spirits and all this stuff, and bad things could happen. You don't know who's going to answer the phone. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I used to crank call people all the time. I never knew who was going to answer the phone. but they say all this stuff. They pay a lot of money to go to these conferences, and then they don't want to play the one thing they think works. It's hysterical. And again, same thing. Look, we want to be scared. We ask questions and then get upset at the answers. It didn't say, hey, by the way, just, I was telling you where your ring was buried. I just want to tell you when you're going to die. Side note, it doesn't. You ask it these questions. And the truth is, we want to know, right? We want answers. And it's why Ouija boards do well when the economy does bad and when we don't have a lot of money. And in World War I, the first thing was all of these boys, husbands, brothers, uncles were overseas. Look, we didn't have email. It took like months to get letters to find out what happened to people. People started using Ouija boards to find out. And originally, you didn't directly contact the spirit with a Ouija board. You asked the Ouija board a question. You would say, Ouija, tell me, what is this? It was seen as something you asked. It just became that all of a sudden people believed they were directly talking to someone, so they kind of dropped the asking Ouija and just asked, is anyone there? So it's just kind of a fascinating thing. So, any other questions or anything people want to ask? Don't be shy.
Is it popular with all cultures, or just mostly one culture here in this room?
I look at talking boards as it's an American expression of a way to or people believing that they can contact something. So the earliest known kind of divination device is a pendulum. And you can make a somewhat like Ouija board with a pendulum and make it move. We don't consider that in the family of talking boards. But as far as we know, the way this works and the way this looks, it's an American invention. It got very popular. Elijah Bond actually, 1892, went to London to open up the Ouija Novelty Company over there. Disaster. Didn't work. Well, why? Because the spiritualist movement probably had already passed in London. They'd already seen this type of stuff, and so they'd come up with these alphabet boards and were using planchettes, so they didn't need to buy a Ouija board. They just kind of were already off on their own doing their own thing. So, Ouija boards, we've seen them in Mexico, so there's Spanish Ouija boards, Australia, France. I think they're everywhere, but no place have they been as popular. However, I will say, Asian horror movies, big-time Ouija boards. Now, they use kind of a different device that they use where they put their fingers on a coin and basically have their letters and symbols all around it and use it to point. But again, it's to kind of get away and to make the Ouija board their own thing. So it's a reflection of their own culture. But again, most people believe that the Ouija board is ancient and old. It just doesn't mean it isn't. We just don't have any proof that it is. It's just, again, we want it to be. It's part of the story and the lore. Any other questions?
I actually was at a horror sale once and actually found something that it wasn't exactly Ouija board, but it did say Ouija one. It was actually called the Ouija Queen.
She's up here.
Yeah, it says like
She's up here.
It actually says like war on the bottom and like that.
Right. Yeah, and people would change basically the different talking boards. And look, that company wasn't out very long. And the reason being is it says Ouija on it. And they couldn't say that because it was a trademark. So. Anything else? Any other stories? All right, well, thank you guys so much. I'm really sorry that you didn't get to see everything. Where did I get my shirt? eBay. It's fantastic. But I'll get you one.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Hope you come back again and see us in some other of our programs. And the boards will be up here for a little bit longer. If you want to take a look.
I have a whole episode. That's it. I loved it. It was called
because of that little boy on the train.
That's right.
Yeah. So I say everything, and that's in my thing because people think it's so awful when people. In my house, and then it goes for
It's okay. They're hundreds of years old. Here's a reason why they've been traveling.
Chris had everything. Like he was, carrying bar or whatever. For VCR and all that kind of stuff. I wonder what elements he was get away with still. Not every time to get out there. Some of these seem familiar, but I don't know. I guess it's the wood or whatever.
I mean, the kind that I use as far as design goes, it's more like, and I don't remember if it was wood. I mean, what is it? These are
So from there,
part of his entourage, if you will. How often do you do these things? How often do you speak out?
Not very often.
No? Okay.
I'm more of a behind-the-scenes chef guy.
Oh, you're the behind-the-scenes guy.
Pointers and
Okay.
the sort of earlier history.
Okay. The more historical aspect of it.
Collection of E6.
Right, and the precursors.
Yeah.
Right. They're in my hotel room.
What are you
Well,
They're
you
right
would have
into
two
you right
wheels
now.
here, and pencil, and move around. And you can understand how hard, exactly, how hard that would be to translate. So,
I think that would be actually pretty nice to those.
most of my British. I talked to a lot of English eBayers, talk them into selling me.
Were they also mostly popular during like the Victorian era and going forward?
The evolution is so much. We are used to such automatic communication.
Right.
And the evolution is so slow.
Yeah.
You've got, it starts off with the Fox sisters basically popping their toe knuckles on stage, claiming it's spirit rapping on wood.
And what was their name?
The Fox sisters. Their older sister about 20 years. They start, making a name for themselves. And so, it's not until they start about 6 years after they start so you better your heart.
Okay.
And then, it's not until 12 years later, in the 1960s, that the automatic and then it's another, so you got automatic writers in the 60s and 70s, it's still another 15, 20 years before it evolves into Ouija. And so it's such a slow evolution. And you see, you realize how tedious it is to sit there while someone is literally knocking on a table, and you have to spell out the alphabet over and over and over, and they're knocking on the letter.
What word today would it?
When did you first get started?
Oh, I've been doing this for
12 years? What drove you to this?
I have the Fox system. My grandfather a piece of the burned Fox cottage. It burned in the 50s.
Alright, that sparked it off. The rest is history.
At college.
Yeah. Cool. Where'd you go to college?
Earlier, so an hour in advance or whatever.
So yeah, we just spent the day.
Yeah, I was a kid. I was fancy.
Okay. We actually got space on the roof of the Hartford factory from where he fell.
Okay.
And Tim's got his cameras, and we're actually dropping the cameras over the edge. So then we drove up with a mattress up leaning against the trash can. We were like,
Oh, nice.
so yeah, we've got all this footage of
Sick. This for the documentary that you're talking about right there?
yeah. We hope to be the
Alrighty. When did you guys meet?
So the old communication between collectors used to be back in the days of eBay. You could see one of the usernames.
Yeah.
Email somebody and they beat you at auction.
Oh, yeah.
And back then,
Back when it was free.
Facebook opened things up a little bit.
Crazy, devout Ouija following fan encounters?
No, nothing like that. And I've never messed with him. As many as I
That's the
have.
craziest thing, both Bob Murch and him, real experts in these fields. they don't play with tobacco, which me as a filmmaker, I can understand it.
Is that out of health respect? Yeah.
You know what?
Genuine.
What's your answer? Because I know Bob's answer is different. What's your answer? Because I didn't get your answer.
I just don't think I've ever been in the right social situation for it, personally.
And then
All
you
right.
missed the train.
And there's been a few times where there have been parties at my house where, everybody's like, oh, let's do it, and it just never quite felt right. But, I wonder, I don't know if I could loosen up enough to do it.
So what's your theory about how it works then? In other words, loosen up, meaning you're an active part of it, or you're just a medium that...
I'm pretty convinced. I'm a skeptic. I'm pretty convinced.
It's like a psychic idea. Nothing supernatural. Nothing spiritual. Okay. Fair enough.
I believe in ghosts.
Sure. Fair enough.
I still didn't understand
You don't have any Ouija stories, do you?
No, I'm Ouija story-less.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to know. The WouijaMovie.com. If you're interested in the documentary, WouijaMovie.com.
When's it pop out?
It'll be out next year on probably national television. Channel. But
Netflix it up.
We are definitely doing that because I've had films on there myself already. But the WouijaMovie.com is for ongoing trailers and stuff like that.
WouijaMovie.com. So you guys have a card or something?
I don't have it on me, but if you go to the WouijaMovie.com, you can contact us today. The WouijaMovie.com. Done. Yep, the WouijaMovie.com. All right, thanks.
So I said, you go, and then I can go to parties, but I can also, graduate. So it was like a nice thing. So, but in their rushing was treasure and an old Ouija board was on there for them. So I used to go and tiki with my dad and flea markets. So I went home to the events.
It's a pleasure. What a thing to photograph, huh? That dude's beautiful.
Just love to document it all.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much history here.
Yeah, the Ouija board said I was going to meet you. No, just joking.
Have you ever played with yourself when you were a kid? Nothing weird ever happened?
Right.
Make my friends run away. But
Yeah, got them scared.
For 30 years. And this was like 25 years ago. And he just died in October.
We're still in October.
I mean, he died in October.
Or you don't sing that story. She doesn't sing that story.
No, we were joking about it. I mean, he had stage 4 cancer. You told me it's hard to kill a coal up.
They don't go easily, and they don't go quietly.
But one time, before he died, he goes, that goddamn Ouija board. So that's what it's
Perfect.
helping to kill him. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming. There's a wiki version. This came in every happy meal. You know what? I'll receive it. Right. Yeah, oh, I don't have a favorite word. They're like children. Okay. So this is the newest one. You love them all differently, but this is the newest one.
I've already posed with that one.
I think we do.
What's the most expensive one?
The most expensive one. This might have been. I was kidding you.